wanted to come on here and do a really quick video because, well, one, I haven't made a video in a little bit, and also I kind of wanted to come in and check in and make it look like I'm not disappearing off of my goals and everything like that. So I'm in week 7, starts tomorrow in my fitness journey out of the first portion, which is just 12 weeks long. And I was really debating whether I wanted to make like a progress post, doing my first month. And I kind of just decided that I didn't want to do that, mostly because the way I feel about the results, I've lost about 20 pounds, but just the way I feel about it is not something I really want to post yet. So I'm gonna save that for the end of the 12 weeks. I have lost 20 pounds though, so yeah, I feel really good about the direction that we're going with everything. So there's not anything I'm going to change about the program. The plan is still the same. I just want to finish out the 12 weeks and really have a good solid foundation to build the next 12-week program. But really this video is about something I realized, with the way we live our lives, how we end up where we're at, the choices we make, what we choose to focus on. Those kind of things, because what happened was a couple nights ago, let me start like this. So both of my parents have passed away from some kind of disease. My mom passed away back in 2018, I think it was. She spent most of her life sick. She suffered with type 1 diabetes. She had, different addiction problems throughout her life. And I grew up, being around that kind of lifestyle, sickness, addiction, which is just a different form of sickness. And so seeing that growing up has kind of produced me, created me the way I am today, but not in the best way I'd like. I always used to tell myself that, watching my mom be sick most of my childhood and everything like that I was never going to let those kind of things happen to me that were within my control, like my weight. I always told and I was always really healthy as a kid too. I was always running around the neighborhood. I was always wreaking havoc in my hometown. Yeah, it was hard for me to picture like a 300-pound me, especially with being, active the way I was, and BMX and different sports throughout the years and everything like that, and BMX and skateboarding. And, I was your typical like 90s, early 2000s kid. So I was pretty active. And, I dabbled, I got in trouble. I had my own problem with, teenage years and drugs and those kind of things too. But, I kind of grew out of that. It took me a little bit, but, I did grow out of that. Yeah. So there was never really a time that I didn't think, in other words, I thought I was bulletproof. I didn't worry about my health at all. In fact, I probably neglected myself more than I should have, and maybe should have been a little bit more worried about my health. But yeah, nothing in my mind ever would suggest to me that even when I got heavier, that I was going to be sick or have high blood pressure or metabolic syndrome and pre-diabetes and anxiety and depression and all that. I mean, even though I suffered with that, it's kind of stuff a little bit all throughout my life, I never let it get to me to the point where it panic attacks in public or having trouble going to the store because I'm having anxiety and those kind of things. Like I always had some level of, depression and anxiety, but it never totally dictated my life in a way that it affected it too much. So it was really hard to kind of acknowledge it and accept that, hey, it's going to take a lot of work to get back on track. So that's a little bit about my mom, a little bit about me. And then, back in 2016, which was probably like the best time period of my life, just being in a new place and getting my life and kind of seeing the way I want a life to be. It was probably like one of the best years of my life. And then, my mom up dying shortly after, which I didn't really know how to handle that just because of my relationship with her. It was hard for me to deal with, that way, because I didn't know how I should feel and what was right and what was wrong about how I feel about her passing away and passing away the way she did too, because, she, like I said, she was sick a lot of her life. So by the time she did pass away, it was it's like I wondered when this day was going to come, but also, maybe she's not suffering anymore, which was good, even though my mom was a fighter, even though she was even throughout all the sickness, my mother was like a fighter through the whole time. She never gave up anything, really. She just coped the wrong way. And she probably could have made her quality of her life better through, better decisions. But I think we can say that for most of us. I think a lot of us can say that we could have, would have, should have, could have type things. Yeah, so I kind of went through like a really good period in my life, even though it was a short period, but it was like really good up until then. And then, my mom died, like I said, and then my dad ended up passing away too. And so now we're getting back to the origin of where I'm going with this is dad died of a respiratory illness. And so, and I didn't really know my dad growing up. And so a few days ago, I was going through his Facebook. I was going through his ex's Facebook because I just wanted to make sure I had pictures, right? Like any pictures of him or my half sister or my half siblings. I wanted to kind of like get those pictures before I didn't have the opportunity to get them, if that makes sense. So I was like saving a bunch of pictures, trying to find pictures of my grandparents on my dad's side. And I noticed something about my dad, and I think we all struggled with this throughout this time period, but my dad shared a lot of things about political issues on Facebook. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's like totally, obviously, that's freedom of speech. We should have the right to, say what we feel on a public forum like Facebook and everything like that. And it's not that I disagreed with my dad, even though he was kind of left leaning. That doesn't change how I feel about him, of course. And it doesn't change, it doesn't make me think any less of him or anything like that. But it just makes me think about how much if you're commenting and producing material on a social media account about politics and the way things are going and et cetera, then that means it must be on your mind enough to post that stuff, right? That means you must be thinking about it enough to the point where you actually post it online. And so I was thinking about that because the posts start in like 2020, 2021. Obviously, we know what was going on around that time frame, but it also makes me think about myself because during that time frame, I was also posting, I think I had a Twitter account back then, and I was like posting things about like a local government in Arizona, Ducey, I think it was at the time. And so I was actually doing that too. And I think it was because there was that whole shift with COVID. It really made us all kind of get divided. And it was just so sad to know that my dad cared about all that so much towards the end of his life when there was probably so much more he could have been thinking about. My dad played guitar and was a fairly decent guitarist from what I can remember, and it's just sad to see that there wasn't more posts on Facebook. And maybe it's I wasn't even friends with my dad on Facebook, or at least with the account that Candy and I have, because we do that weird joint account thing with Facebook, and and so maybe I didn't see the other posts from my dad, but there was definitely a bunch of political stuff in there, and it was just sad to think that there wasn't more about the music, because there's a lot of things that my dad and I talked about, and a few things that we did that I did get to experience with him, like snowboarding trips. He taught me how to shoot a gun. He also taught me a lot about music and turned me on to some really good progressive rock, that I probably wouldn't have experienced without him. I'm a big sci-fi nerd, and I remember my dad kind of being a sci-fi nerd. He's the one who turned me on to things like Orson Scott Card, I think it is, Ender's Game and those kind of like sci-fi genre, and it was just so sad that he had all these interests that are very similar to mine, and all we saw on Facebook was a bunch of political stuff towards the end of his life. And it's like, I hope that's not what he was really dwelling on towards the end, because there's so much more in life. And so it makes me think about myself and just the way society is and what we focus on, right? And that's where we go. Now I've come full circle with the video. Is it makes me think about all the things that we take the time, valuable time and precious time, and what we really think about during the time that we have on this planet, and the time that we have with each other. And it breaks my heart, because you see so much negativity in the world, of course, but you also see a lot of uselessness. Like there's a lot of things that is a waste, and it might feel pleasurable. That's the worst and actually fucked up part about this whole thing is, there's some things that are meant to occupy your time, to ensnare your attention, and it's just a complete waste of time. Whether it's scrolling, whether it's video games, whether it's even movies and TV shows. I mean, and I've been, I'm a modern guy. I've watched TV my whole life. There was never a time where TV wasn't in my life. Yet, even though it's good, you don't want to say at the end of your life that all I did was watch TV. All I did was watch movies. All I did was listen to the news. All I did was play video games. Not that there's anything wrong inherently with any of those things, of course, but if you, at the end of your life, if you got to meet God, and God was to give you a timeline of all the time that you spent doing this activity or that activity, would you want 80% of your life be consumed by or consuming television? Would you want a majority of your life to be consumed by addiction? Would you want the majority of your life to be consumed by or occupied by illness, or not doing the things you want to do because of your insecurity of how you feel about yourself, or your mental health and things that you have not done? At that point, you really are a prisoner in your own life. If you're living or working at a job that you don't really care about, which I think all of us have done at some point, is that how you want to spend your whole life? Like my dad, I don't really, like I said, there's a lot of things I don't know about him, but I just hope that towards the end of his life, he wasn't so worried about politics, because in the end, it doesn't matter where he went, wherever it was, or wherever he is now. Politics don't matter anymore at all, and I don't think anything about politics got him where he is. Nothing, none of it. It wouldn't have mattered who won the election. It wouldn't have mattered what policies were changed. And one thing that also breaks my heart about that is, I'm from Alaska. My family's from Alaska. He lived in Alaska towards the end of his life, actually most of his life. And we used to have this saying: if you're in any other state outside of Alaska, we called it the lower 48, because Alaska's actually separated. For all you kids that don't know geography, we're actually separated. Canada it separates the lower 48 states and Alaska. And so politics wise, if you just turn the TV off, you would not have to care about politics whatsoever. You are in Alaska. You could literally turn it off, and other than maybe sales tax and your taxes and whatever, you would be so unaffected by politics. It's unreal, except for something like COVID, where, eventually, the government does have some say in your life. But I'm saying, besides those extreme circumstances, I grew up conservative, but I didn't think about it. My values were my values. They had nothing to do with politics. The things I believed in, the things I cherish with my freedoms and stuff like that had nothing to do with politics. I was just raised that way. Right? It's not because of the news. It's not because of the channels, or what channel we were watching, or anything like that. So again, it just bums me out. It makes me makes me think about my life and just how I can encourage you guys or anybody who happens to be watching this, or if you ever watch it, that your time matters, and what you choose to do with your time really matters as well. You just got to make the right decisions. A lot of the fact that both of my parents are dead, is what's really driving me to change my life now at 41 to get healthy again. My dad died at 68. My mom died even younger, I think, not much younger, but I think she might have been 60. I don't want to die that young. I don't want to die super old either, but man, I want to make it to 70. I know that. I want to be a grandpa sitting in a recliner sometime in my 80s, hopefully being active. I look at my grandparents now. My grandfather, he's active. He hasn't stopped. He's got his leg chopped off and he's still chopping wood. He got his leg chopped off and he's still chopping wood. Let that sink in. And he's in his 80s. Like, come on. I was just telling Candy the other day, it's just proof that if you don't stop, you won't get sick. And even if you do get sick, you'll be healthy enough to handle whatever. And that's not for everybody. I know there's outliers. I know there's different things for people that have a disease that is compromising their health to the point where it does stop them from doing things. So I'm not talking about you people. I'm talking about the people that do have control over their health and stuff. If you don't stop moving, you'll keep moving, right? If you want your back to feel good, if you want your knees to feel good, if you want any of those things, you just keep moving. Doesn't have to be special, doesn't have to be whatever. One of the commenters said that's very third chin of me. Well, you know what, dude? It's like I'm working on my life and I'm encouraging people to work on their life as well. That's all there is to it. I might have a third chin, but that doesn't mean anything about what my message is and what I'm trying to do. So I'm not going to give up. I'm working on changing my life, and like I tell my kids, it is okay to change. I believe everybody should be changing for the better or making an effort to be better. There's nothing wrong with who you are, but change, if it's good, is worth pursuing. And I think everybody should be working on some kind of changing their life for the better. So that's basically it. Yeah, I just wanted to get on here and talk about that because that's been weighing on my brain and my mind and my heart a little bit, just because I miss my parents. I wish I could have more time with them, and I wish I could have gotten to know them better over the years. It also makes me cherish the time that I have with the people that I do have. Try to reflect on that yourself, because it's happening in your own life as well.